Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, how to become healthy, wealthy, and wise no matter where you happen to be right now. That's next.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's I Spies.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
So let's talk financial literacy. My parents didn't teach me anything about money. And they didn't teach it in school. And I think that's true for a lot of Americans. And no matter how much money they make, how much do you keep? And are you saving for retirement? And all of those things that are somewhat taboo in society. We just don't talk about these things. But we're going to talk about it today with Mary Lyons. She's the founder of the Benchmark Income Group, and you're known as the Wealth Woman. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
All right. Well, I want to know how you got started.
Geez, that's a long-winded story, I think, to say the least. My dad has actually been an advisor since I was about 4 years old. When I was, probably in the first grade, making, the memory books with your school picture, and you have to write what you want to be when you grow up. I actually wrote financial advisor in there. That and professional baseball player. One of those was definitely not an option. But as I got older, I really felt like that sort of stereotype of the person kind of sitting in a back room in the dark crunching numbers is what a financial advisor was. And it wasn't until after I graduated from college and I started making my own money that I began to realize how fortunate I was that my dad had spent so much time talking to us about what we should be doing with our money while we were growing up. And so I started to have these conversations with my friends and with my friends' families, and it was amazing to me how many people had never had these conversations. Just like you said, kind of introducing the show, it's not a thing that we talk about, it's taboo. And I began to feel a sense of moral imperative to get into the business. And so I reached out to my dad and I said, hey, can I come work with you? Will you actually train me to do what you do? And that was the segue.
So how often do you run into a woman who either has gotten divorced or she lost her husband and she comes to you and she has no idea about any of the finances? Is that a common tale?
It is, and I think it is probably more common in Texas than it is in other places. But that does happen a lot where a woman will just defer to her husband and say he takes care of everything, and suddenly that responsibility is on them, and they have never seen that modeled out and aren't sure what decisions to make. I think that now you see more and more women who want to take control, who want to be empowered to make those decisions. But I think it's a gradual process, and it's if you can see it, you can be it. So the more we can show women, hey, you can do this, the more they actually will do it.
And she knows what she's talking about. The media turns to her for quotes all the time. In fact, you just had a wonderful feature in Modern Luxury. Let's put that on the screen. That's a beautiful picture. Do you like working with the media?
I do. I absolutely love it. I actually have a degree in journalism, so I feel like I grew up around that environment, and it's fun for me to get to toe in and dabble a little bit.
Very cool. Well, tell us about the moniker Wealth Woman, because I love it and people remember it. Where'd that come from?
So I found myself thinking about how do you make yourself memorable? And because there's a million financial advisors out there, right? Everybody has gone to an event and an advisor just attaches themselves and follows you around. And I wanted something that would help me stand out. And so I hopped on Google and I started doing searches to see what was available, what other people were using. And when I looked up the website for the Wealth Woman, no one owned it. And I thought, this must be a compliance issue. So I purchased it right away just to make sure someone else didn't sneak in and get it. But when I talked to our compliance department, they said, no, there's no problems. And I thought, occasionally the universe just throws you a little nugget, and it's almost like a little God wink that tells you you're on the right path. And so I just went for it.
Well, you took a bold move about a year ago when you went out on your own. Tell us about what went into that decision.
Yeah, so my dad and I worked together and built a firm over probably a 10-year time period. And when he was ready to retire, I was not ready to take the firm over. My kids were young, and they still wanted to hang out with me all the time. And so we sold the company, and I just stayed on as an advisor for a while. And after doing that for about 2 years, I really just felt like it was time for me to build something that was my own, where I could train and cultivate other advisors to teach the very same things that I do with my clients, because I was hitting a capacity issue where I was at the limit of how many clients can I actually handle and bring on each year. I got to train more people to do this so that we can help more families.
And it's been very successful, and you launched it during a year of a pandemic where there's a lot of craziness going on. That must have been challenging.
Yeah, I think I get bored easily is the only excuse there. But I figured if the world is already in chaos, what difference is it going to make if I just add in a little more? So we launched Benchmark Income Group in June of 2020.
And you also have a very popular podcast, the Big Wealth Podcast. We've got a trailer for that. Let's go ahead and roll that now.
Hi, I'm Mary Lyons, and I am the Wealth Woman.
And I'm Eric Alexander from Benchmark Income Group.
And this is the Big Wealth Podcast.
Everything you've ever been taught about money is wrong.
But don't worry, we're here to help.
On this podcast, we'll use the same tools you already know to actually help set you free.
Free to do what you want with your time, with your money, and with your energy. Free to live your life the way you have dreamt about.
So we're going to talk about wealth knowledge, personal reflections, and the financial industry news of the day.
Welcome to the Big Wealth Podcast.
Well, I love it that you're all about educating people. In the case of Melinda Gates, I think she's going to be okay. She doesn't need a lot of financial education. But for the average person, it really pays to dig in.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot that's happened over really the past 40 years or so that has dramatically changed the environment that we find ourselves in when we are trying to figure out how we can eventually retire. Because if you kind of go back in time a little bit, prior to 1978, there were no 401ks. Everybody who worked for a big reputable company knew they were going to have income while they were working and a pension when they retired. And they also knew they could count on Social Security. And what happens in an environment like what we have now is that most pensions are defunct or heading in that direction. And Social Security, I think a lot of the people I talk to see that as a question mark. They don't know what it's going to look like or, how long it will be there and be properly funded. And so that puts a lot more pressure on our investments to perform now than at any other time in history. And yet the financial services industry is still doing things the same way that they have been doing it really since the United States became the United States. It's collect the assets, put it into the stock market, and let it grow. And so what we really think is important is understanding, why are you doing all of this? And the answer is to produce an income. And so where we start with is really by focusing on, if I need an income, what can I do today that will optimize my income strategies? And then we back into, where should we put the money? And that's very different than what we see from most advisors, because most advisors will just put the money somewhere, grow it, and hope that it's going to be enough on the back end. But I'm a big Stephen Covey fan. I don't know about you.
Me too.
And he says start with the end in mind. And so if I know that the end goal is to spend the money, we need to start with that from the very beginning, because frequently if you know where to put the money, it takes a lot less.
Yes.
And that means you can have more now and in the future.
I love it. So tell me what an engagement looks like. It doesn't cost them anything to come visit you for the first time to see if it's a good fit, right?
Right. And I that goes back to me starting my career in my mid-20s. Had I charged somebody to come talk to me, I'm not sure I would have had all that many clients. But what I have found is people really should have the freedom to explore what their options are and not have to pay to do that exploration. So normally what we do in a first meeting is we really spend time helping the client understand what's happening with your money. Given where you are today, what problems are you likely to run into? I call it the laying of the landmines. If you are walking into a field and the field is full of landmines and you don't know where they are, chances are you're probably going to step in one. But if I can show you a map and show you where the landmines are, it becomes very easy to avoid stepping on those landmines, and you can get successfully where you're trying to go. And so that first meeting is really just making sure people understand where the problems are before it's too late to do anything about it. And at the end of that conversation, if our clients feel like, yes, this is me, I have these problems, then the next step is really to sit down with them, understand their situation, show them what the solutions could look like, and then really paint the roadmap of here's where you're headed with what you're doing today. And if you make the following changes, here's how much extra income you could actually have in retirement. So it's all fact-based. And I love that because it gets rid of my opinion. I got plenty of those, but they have no space in a financial plan.
Well, I can see why you're so successful because you're very charming, and I don't think as many people in your industry realize as should that this is a trust that you're creating with someone. I mean, they're going to share things with you that they wouldn't share with their closest friends. So building that trust is so important, isn't it?
I would agree with that statement. And I do find, there's a joke in our office, and it's slightly off color, but I think it's okay to say that more people will talk to you about their sex life than their finances, right?
I think that's true.
It seems to be that finances, it's really an intimate conversation. And, I think when it comes down to it, my personal belief is that money is a tool. It's just a tool, and it's meant to be used to create a life that you can be excited about. So it's the idea of a life of design rather than a life of default. And so we really spend a lot of time with our clients understanding what are their priorities, what's really important to them on a day-to-day basis, so that we can then get creative and talk to them about what they can do. And on the podcast trailer, I think you could probably see I'm the creative one in the relationship, right? And my business partner is a recovering engineer. And so I think there's some magic in that combination because I get to build a roadmap and help the clients figure out where they're going. But I have someone who's very talented at making sure that if we are following a map, we've got a high performance vehicle and there's gas in the tank. So that sort of relationship I think is important. And to the trust point, people ask me all the time, should I work with an advisor who is a fiduciary? And my response to that is really kind of always the same. There are people who are fiduciaries who do very bad things, right? You can't regulate morality. And I think it is important to ask those questions so that you understand how your advisor is incentivized and paid. But ultimately, trust your gut. If you're sitting across from somebody and you don't trust that they will do the right thing for you in every situation, regardless of how they get paid, you should leave their office immediately and go find someone else. And I think there are a lot of people that think, maybe this person doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies, but they are held to a fiduciary standard, so they'll do that. And human nature just doesn't work that way.
Yes.
And so I think it's absolutely key to have those. Take your time. Don't jump into a relationship with an advisor. Frequently, I'll tell people if they're going through a divorce or they've had a death and that was the triggering event to come talk to me, we're not going to do anything for 6 months unless there's, a claim that has to be made or an account that has to be set up. But we're going to take time to get to know each other before you make any big decisions. And I think that's rare in this industry.
I agree. You've been a great guest. We're going to put up a couple of websites. We're going to put up benchmarkincome.com, and we're also going to put up wealthwoman.com. Mary Lyons, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is great.
Thanks for having me. I had fun.
You bet. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time.